My phone rang at 3 a.m. with my mom panicking. Your sister's in the hospital. Send $22,000 now, or she'll have no support and he'll be buried in bills. I said, call your perfect son, hung up, and went back to sleep. The following morning, I got a call from the police station. My mom rang me in full panic at 3 in the morning, barely letting me breathe before blurting out that my sister was in the hospital and that I needed to wire $22,000 right away or she'd be left without support and they'd dump all the bills on him. So I told her to call her perfect son, hung up, and rolled over like it was any other night. By the time morning came, the next call wasn't from family at all. It was from the police station. My name's Mike. I'm 31. I work as a firefighter. I'm the middle kid, the guy who remembers birthdays, fixes dripping faucets, and keeps things from falling apart. When there's smoke, I move toward it while everyone else runs the other way, but at home it's flipped, because people only run toward me when something's broken. I rent a one-bedroom place over the station gym since it's cheap, and I actually like falling asleep to sirens, and my days off usually smell like laundry soap and burnt coffee. I keep my turnout gear lined up in the hallway like a good luck charm, and I don't own much beyond a bed, a TV with a cracked corner, and a drawer packed with ash-colored t-shirts. Mom likes to say I'm reliable, Dad prefers stubborn, and my younger sister Lily calls whenever a pipe bursts, a car won't start, or her boyfriend can't figure things out. My older brother Ryan never calls at all, just sends a text once a month, usually a screenshot of something he needs paid. That night the clock said 3:04 a.m. When my phone buzzed across the nightstand, rattled, and dropped to the floor, and I picked up before the second ring even finished because years in a firehouse teach you that bad news doesn't wait for voicemail. Mike, my mom's voice tore straight into my ear. It's Lily. She's in the hospital. I see you. And we need $22,000 right now, or they'll leave her without support, and we'll be stuck with all the bills. I shot upright, my heart racing, bare feet hitting the cold floor as I asked what happened. But she cut me off sharp and told me not to argue. Just send the money, saying she knew I had savings and that I was the only one who could handle it. In the background, I heard my dad, tired and bitter, saying that if I really cared, I'd already be wiring it, and that there was no point explaining things to a hero. Everything narrowed to one sharp point, the red digits of the clock and my name being thrown like an insult, and after rubbing my eyes I told her to call her perfect son, calmly and flat, to call Ryan. Then I ended the call, flipped the phone face down, and lay back like we hadn't just lit our whole family on fire. My chest thumped like a drum, but I didn't move, just stared at the ceiling crack I'd never bothered to fix, the thin line looking like a fault where old voices leaked through, my mom's panic, my dad's contempt, the same script we'd all memorized. I kept thinking how she said ICU and she said money, but never said why, never asked if I was okay, never even said please. The phone buzzed 3 more times and I ignored it, turning the screen down and shoving it under my pillow like I could smother a siren, then slept the way you sleep between calls on a rig, half awake, body ready, mind refusing to settle. At 7:11 a.m., it rang again from a number I didn't recognize, and a clipped voice said this was Sergeant Kowalski from the 12th Precinct asking if this was Mike, last name. And when I said yes, he told me I needed to come down to the station to talk about last night involving my sister and my parents. The line stayed quiet just long enough for me to hear my own breathing before I pulled on my boots and said I'd be there in 10. I grew up in a house where Mike will figure it out was basically a family motto, where Ryan was the golden kid until he wasn't, the basketball star, the scholarship dream Dad bragged about to anyone who'd listen. And when that all fell apart with a knee injury, he learned a new move, turning his problems into someone else's debt. Lily learned how to be cheerful and small, and I learned how to carry weight. At 19, I started volunteering weekends, and by 23, I was full-time, living on smoke and paperwork in equal measure. The job made sense to me because fire has rules. You learn its moods, respect what it wants, and you don't try to negotiate with it or call it unfair when it burns you. You just put it out. My family didn't run on rules. They ran on stories. Stories where Ryan always tried his best, Lily was fragile, and I was good with money because I didn't buy things, which really meant Mike would send a transfer and clean it up later. Money flowed like a river downhill toward whoever was making the most noise, so when Dad's alternator died, I paid. When Mom cracked a crown, I covered the dentist. When Ryan sank cash into a friend's gym, I signed a short-term loan with brutal interest and pretended it didn't hurt. And when Lily moved in with a guy who listed crypto as a career, I put first and last month's rent on my card to get her out. Every yes earned me a soft promise from Mom that they wouldn't forget, and they forgot instantly, because the next favor always showed up wearing the same face. A month back at Sunday dinner, Dad peered over his glasses and said I was 31 with nothing to show but biceps and a savings account, and asked when I'd start thinking long-term, buying a house, giving my mother something to be proud of. And I asked quietly, proud like Ryan, not challenging him, just testing the air. Dad's jaw tightened. Ryan showed up late like always with boxes of limited sneakers and left with leftovers and a gas card I loaded just this once. Kissed Mom. Told Lily she looked tired and never looked at me. Lily's boyfriend at the time, a guy wearing a watch he couldn't afford, leaned over and whispered that my parents were intense, and I told him only when they're awake, which made Lily snort wine out her nose before apologizing like laughter cost extra in our house. 2 weeks later, Lily stood at my door holding a trash bag of clothes with a split lip, and we sat on the floor with frozen peas pressed to her face while she cracked a weak joke about them being organic. I offered her the couch, offered to change the locks, and she said she needed to handle it herself before asking if I could spot her the deposit on a new place, and I said yes, because that's what I always did. That night as she slept, she looked 8 years old again, all braces and bangs, asking me to promise monsters didn't check closets, and we made a plan where she'd save money, take the clinic job, block his number, and pay me back a little at a time. I gave her my old iPhone since hers was shattered, set it up fresh with a new passcode and Face ID, clean and blank like a wall with nothing written on it yet. The first real crack showed up on payday when I noticed a cash withdrawal on my account that I couldn't remember making, $200 gone, then another charge, $40 at a gas station clear across town, and I frowned, reset my bank password, and told myself I was just tired and careless. Then I saw that the wallet I keep tucked in the kitchen drawer wasn't quite right, my extra card, the emergency one, sitting in a different slot than I left it, and my skin started buzzing like a warning alarm. I counted everything twice, every card accounted for, took a slow breath, and reminded myself that I'm a firefighter and I know what real panic smells like. And this wasn't that. This was just suspicion. I didn't ask Lily about it, even though I should have, and instead I watched quietly, snapping photos of my card numbers and turning on location alerts for every new purchase, which isn't how family is supposed to work, but is exactly how you act when the fire's already burning and you just can't see the flames yet. 3 nights later, I dragged myself home from a 16-hour shift reeking of wet rope and grief, and found Lily on my couch with mascara smeared under her eyes like smoke. Her phone on speaker as Mom's voice filled the room saying your brother needs to be a team player for once in his life, and I echoed once under my breath while Lily flinched. Mom kept going, explaining that Ryan had a lead on a used truck so he could start deliveries and all he needed was a cosign, no money, just my name, because we're family, and I looked straight at Lily while she stared down at the table and said no. A simple word that felt clean and solid in my mouth. Mom sucked in a sharp breath and snapped that I always thought I was better than them because I ran into burning buildings, and I told her I just thought I was tired, and then she hung up. 2 minutes later, Ryan texted me to chill out and said it was just paperwork, but I didn't reply. I just stepped into the shower and cranked the water too hot until the mirror fogged over enough that I didn't have to look at myself. That same week, Lily moved out, new roommate, new keys, hugging me tight, and promising she'd bring back the phone charger she accidentally packed. And after she left, I checked the kitchen drawer twice, finding every card exactly where I'd put it, and finally let out a breath that felt like I'd been holding it for a year. Then came 3:04 a.m. Again, Mom's voice blaring like a siren with teeth. ICU, $20,000, we'll stick him with all the bills. And I thought, stick who? Knowing the answer was me like it always had been, right up until I used a brand new word. At the station before heading to the precinct, my captain glanced up from his coffee and asked if I was good, and I told him my family's house was on fire, and he nodded like he knew the address and told me to watch my air and not breathe them in. When I stepped into the police station lobby, Sergeant Kowalski studied me the way you look at a building that might have a hidden basement, said you're the brother, and when I asked what happened, he led me into a small room that smelled like copier toner and old arguments. with a metal chair and a table marked by a water ring like a thumbprint. He slid a notepad toward me and said that at 2:17 a.m. my sister Lily, full name, was brought into county with a panic attack and dehydration, and after a pause added that there were traces of oxycodone in her blood, but she was stable and out of danger, and my jaw loosened just enough to let air back in. When I asked about my parents, he rubbed one eye and explained that my mother had called the hospital demanding a financial hold be lifted from Lily's chart, which isn't a real thing, and then insisted they contact me to pay $22,000 to activate support, which also isn't how hospitals work. I closed my eyes as he told me they lied to me and only called because the cards they tried first had declined, then said there were reports of attempted withdrawals across 3 accounts tied to my name. And when I asked how he turned the notepad so I could see my spare card number, another I didn't recognize linked to a prepaid phone, and a third belonging to Ryan's old checking account. He explained that earlier in the week there were small test charges at 2 gas stations and a corner store, and that last night someone tried a $2,000 cash advance near the hospital that failed, then tried my card ending in 4881, which approved $200, and that they pulled the camera footage and it was my father. It took a moment for my brain to accept that sentence. My father, the man whose voice could charm food off a plate, standing at an ATM with my number in his hand, and the sergeant watched me steadily before telling me they had Lily's statement, that she said she didn't know the plan and woke up in the yard asking someone to call me. But my mother took the phone. When I asked if Lily was in trouble, he said she was sick and scared, then slid a small evidence bag across the table with a folded sticky note inside, my handwriting on the front reading Wi-Fi plus PIN, and I felt a wave of recognition because it was from my apartment router, the note I kept under a fridge magnet. On the back, someone else had scribbled a list of numbers, the last 4 matching my spare card, and I realized someone had flipped my note and turned it into a key. I couldn't trust my voice and just looked at the sergeant, the space between us feeling like a hallway full of smoke. While he told me this was the part where he had to ask if I wanted to press charges. I stared at the bag, at my own handwriting turned into a weapon, hearing Mom's 3:04 a.m. voice in my head, hearing Dad's muttered hero, hearing myself say call your perfect son, and the old script begged me to fold, to fix it, to pay it, to let them call it a misunderstanding by lunch. Instead, I asked what would happen if I did file, and he laid it out plainly: fraud, attempted theft, possibly identity theft, the hospital running its own report because of the harassment, and Lily being offered rehab instead of charges if she agreed. My mouth tasted like pennies when I asked what happened if I didn't, and he said they'd go home and do it again, to me or someone who couldn't afford it, reminding me that fire has rules even if families don't, but I do, and I told him to file it on both of them. He nodded once, the way we do when someone makes a choice they hate but know is right, slid the form over, and my hand shook on the first line and then steadied as I signed. The door burst open and my mother stormed in with her hair still perfect and outrage wrapped around her like a coat, hissing my name and demanding to know what was going on and why they were saying I accused them of stealing. You must have misunderstood me last night, she said, telling me I'd been half asleep. Then she turned to the sergeant and put on that sugary smile sharp enough to cut skin, saying, "Officer, we aren't criminals. This is a family issue," while I kept my eyes locked on the paperwork and told her plainly that she'd tried to take my money. She gave a short, dry laugh and snapped that money didn't matter because my sister was sick and asked what the hell was wrong with me. And when I finally looked up, I told her what was wrong was that she'd already decided I'd say yes before she even bothered to ask. Her face shifted as the mask slipped, and she launched into how they did everything for this family, and I was repaying them by humiliating them in front of, and I cut in quietly asking in front of who exactly: the police, the bank, the hospital, or the mirror. She reached for my arm, and I pulled away, and she stared down at her empty hand like it had betrayed her. That's when my dad stepped into the doorway, eyes narrowed, calling me real brave for hiding behind paperwork, and all the things I'd held in for years stacked up behind my teeth, until one clean sentence came out, and I told him he could stop calling me son, that my name was Mike. He smirked, but his eyes flickered, and when my mom opened her mouth, I shook my head and told her no more, not today. I slid the form back to the sergeant, my signature looking like a road I'd finally decided to walk, and left the precinct feeling like I'd just stepped out of a building that was still smoldering, the air tasting like burned wires, the sun outside way too bright for how the morning felt. Back at the station, nobody asked questions. They just handed me a mug and left me a quiet corner, which is how love looks where I work, and the captain dropped a donut by my elbow and told me there was a hydrant drill at 10 if I wanted noise, and I nodded because I really did. Around noon, my phone lit up with messages that started as guilt and curdled into threats. My mom saying I'd humiliated them, my dad promising I'd pay for this, an unknown number asking how I could do this to my sister, and Ryan texting, "Bro, what the hell did you tell the cops?" So I turned the phone face down and went outside to wash the rig, the hose thumping in my hands as water slammed against steel. And something inside me finally loosened for the first time in years. At 3, Lily texted from a hospital device saying she was sorry, and I stared until the words blurred. Then she added that she didn't know about the cards and swore she told them to ask me and didn't realize they already had my numbers, begging me not to hate her. Then said they wanted her to go into a program and that she thought she should. I wrote back that she should and that I'd help with the program, but not with lies, and she replied with a heart and a crying face that made me want to punch a wall and hug her at the same time. That night, I went back to my apartment, and for the first time it felt like it was actually mine, and I pulled the magnet off the fridge, tossed the Wi-Fi node in the trash, changed every password, froze the spare card, called the bank to add a passphrase only I could answer, and signed up for alerts that would scream if even a penny moved. I wrote a list on the back of an old shift calendar called Things That Are Mine, and it was short, but it felt sacred. My name, my paycheck, my sleep. 2 days later, the extended family blew up, an aunt blasting a group text saying this would be discussed at Sunday dinner because family settles things together, and I replied that crimes don't get settled over pot roast, and she went quiet. Ryan tried a new angle and showed up outside the station leaning on his car like a bad decision, and I spotted him through the bay doors and stepped out into the sun before anyone else could get dragged into it. He held his hands up and said this had gone too far. That mom freaked. Dad panicked. Lily was sick, and I really planned to press charges, and I told him he used my numbers. His smile tightened as he admitted he might have snapped a photo once for emergencies, and I told him he wasn't the emergency. He was the guy who sets the fire and calls it weather. He rolled his eyes and told me to spare him the firefighter metaphors and just tell them I made a mistake, and I said I hadn't. He stepped closer until I could smell the cologne he couldn't afford and reminded me he was my brother, and I told him I was the bank, or at least that's what he'd always thought. He laughed sharp and ugly and asked who gave me his couch when Dad cut me off senior year, and I reminded him he charged me rent for a busted couch and then borrowed that cash back for gas. And he flinched not because it wasn't true, but because I remembered. He tried one last move, bringing up Mom's heart and the stress, and I stopped him cold, telling him no more bodies in front of the truck. Not hers, not Lily's, not mine. He stared at me for a long moment like he was choosing between a punch and a compliment, then picked silence, got in his car, and peeled away like he'd won something, even though he hadn't. The following week, my mom entered a new phase, public martyrdom, calling relatives with gentler lies where I misunderstood a medical scare, or the bank messed up, or for church folks I'd been lost to pride, and I didn't correct anyone because the official record was loud enough. The sergeant called with updates, cards flagged, hospital note filed, court date set in 6 weeks for my parents, and he added that Lily had checked into a 30-day program and asked if I could bring her a hoodie, no strings. I told him I would, found an old station sweatshirt with a bleach stain on the pocket, and dropped it at the desk with her name on it without asking to see her because she needed less audience and more oxygen. At work, I slept better in the top bunk than I ever had at home. Woke up actually hungry, started running after shifts not to escape anything, but to feel my lungs working for me, and I dug out a box from under my bed labeled Someday. Inside were brochures for paramedic school, a rope rescue course, and a pamphlet for a small cabin by a lake I'd circled years ago and shoved away because family emergencies didn't wait for deposits. And on Thursday, I booked the rope course. On Friday, I called the cabin number and asked if the off-season rate was still that tiny number in the corner, and when it was I put down the deposit without my hand shaking. That's when my mom found out the charges were real. She called and left a voicemail that began with a tired sigh and built into a full-blown storm, telling me that if I went through with this I was dead to them, asking if I heard her, saying dead, and I sat on the edge of my bed with the phone pressed to my ear listening to the person who gave birth to me explain that I no longer existed. When it ended, I deleted the message and set my phone to accept calls from favorites only, which at that point meant just 3 people, my captain, my partner, and yes, Lily's counselor, who kept me updated with Lily's permission. I learned then that boundaries aren't brick walls, they're doors, and I decide when they open. Sunday showed up without pot roast or forced smiles, and I made eggs and ate them standing at the stove in my boxers, surprised that the quiet didn't feel empty but fresh, like clean air. That afternoon, an unfamiliar number rang through, a dry voice announcing they were collections calling for Mr. Ryan, last name, explaining he'd listed me as a co-signer on a truck loan, and I felt my throat stay calm as I said I hadn't signed anything and asked them to send me the document with the signature. The email arrived with a sloppy scrawl pretending to be my name and failing badly, and I replied with the police report number, and 10 minutes later another email landed apologizing for the inconvenience and confirming the application had been withdrawn, which made me laugh out loud alone in my kitchen, the sound cracking open like a window. The last real aftershock hit midweek when the precinct asked me to come back and add a supplemental statement because my mother had submitted one riddled with holes, and I showed up wearing the same boots as before, steady this time. While I sat with the sergeant, I heard a familiar voice booming in the hallway, my dad, too loud for indoors, telling anyone who'd listened that his kid thought he was a saint and was trying to teach them a lesson, and I stared at the table until my reflection stopped shaking, then asked the sergeant if I could say one thing to them when we finished. He thought for a second and told me to keep it short. When I stepped into the hallway, my parents turned toward me like the room had suddenly tipped, my dad's mouth already chambered with something sharp and my mom's eyes glossy, and I lifted a hand and told them don't, explaining I was only there to say 2 sentences. They waited, hating that they had to. First, I said, I love Lily, and I will help her get healthy. Second, I am done paying for lies, threats, and emergencies you manufacture. I looked straight at my mom and told her that if her heart hurt, she should see a doctor, and if her pride hurt, she should sit with it. My dad scoffed and accused me of thinking I was better than them, and I shook my head and said no. I was exactly who I'd always been, the one who does the hard thing. Only now the hard thing was not rescuing them. I left before they could reload. Outside the building, the air smelled like rain, and I let it wash over me without looking back. A month later, the court softened a hard truth when my parents pled down to attempted fraud, ordered restitution, and assigned a class that probably won't fix much, but at least names the damage, along with a 90-day no-contact order unless a mediator is involved. And 90 days feels small unless you've never known a quiet week, because to me it felt like an ocean. Lily finished her 30 days and looks like herself again, the version from before the men and pills and the weight of always being the soft target. And we sat together on a bench outside her meetings with coffee we didn't need and sunlight we did. She told me she was sorry she became another emergency, and I told her she was just a person in pain. And when she joked that she'd taken my charger and that I'd gone quiet, I told her she could take my charger, but not my name, and we laughed and made a plan as equals, where she pays me back when she's stable, and if she slips she calls me before she calls anyone who would sell her another lie. The firehouse threw me a small celebration for finishing the rope certification, a grocery store cake with too much frosting and a crooked paper banner that read "Not God" in marker because firefighters can't help themselves, and I took a picture that became the first one in a long time where I wasn't half watching my phone for the next family disaster. My mom tried one last angle, sending letters to the station because she knew I opened anything that looked official, but I didn't read them. I handed them to admin, logged them according to the order, and went for a run, choosing boundaries over drama while my body understood that choice before my brain fully caught up. I sleep now, real sleep, not the kind that waits for a 3 a.m. siren shaped like your mother's voice, and I drove out to the lake cabin for a weekend where I sat on the dock with my feet in the water, phone on Do Not Disturb, thinking about how strange it is to choose yourself and live through it. I thought about my dad calling me a hero like it was an insult, and the truth settled in simple and clean, because pulling people from burning houses doesn't teach you how to stop lighting your own. That part you have to learn on purpose. On my last morning there, Lily texted me a photo from group, her in a thrift store sweater with her hair in a messy bun holding a cheap coin stamped with 30, and the message said she was building a life that didn't need saving, and I stared at it until my eyes blurred before sending back a picture of the dock and writing me too. When I got home, I made one more list, Not of things that are mine because I already know those, but of things I don't owe, like an apology for protecting myself, a loan disguised as love, a seat at a table where I'm the attraction, or a yes that burns me alive. And I tape that list inside my pantry door where only I'll ever see it. That's enough, because not everything has to be announced to matter. Sometimes I still hear the ghost of my dad's laugh or my mom's sigh echoing down the hallway of my head. And sometimes I replay the night I said call your perfect son and wonder if it sounded cruel. But then I remember the evidence bag with my handwriting twisted into a weapon, the ATM photo, and the sergeant's quiet nod when I chose the kind of hard that lets you grow. People think closure is a door slamming, but it's not. It's unlearning the habit of handing out keys. So here's the truth in the plainest words I have left. I will not be a wallet with a heartbeat. I will not be a siren you summon because you don't want to live within your limits. I love my sister. I don't hate my parents. I just love my own life more than I love being used. That 3 a.m. call finally taught me what I should have learned years ago in a room full of smoke. That if you don't put on your own air, first you pass out saving people who never plan to leave the fire, and I'm done breathing theirs. My name is Mike. I fight fires, just not my own anymore.